I'm Todd Jones, recovering from 30 years as a sports writer. Thanks for joining me as I sit down with some of the best sports writers of our time, who knew the greatest athletes and coaches and experienced firsthand some of the biggest sports moments of the past half century. We'll share stories behind the stories, some we've only told each other. Pull up a seat on Press Box Access. Hey Hoynsie, you're not finished with us yet. This is part 2 of our conversation with Paul Hoynes, the legendary baseball writer in Cleveland. Hoynsie started covering the Indians in 1983. Now the team is known as the Guardians, and he's still on the beat. In this part 2, we pick back up with more talk about Albert Belle, the slugger who put fear into opposing pitchers and caused reporters to walk on eggshells.
So what was Albert like to deal with on a day-to-day basis as the beat guy covering the team, and you got this very temperamental person, unbelievable ball player, and yet he's not easy to be around. How did you navigate that relationship?
Albert could charm the birds out of the tree one day and would just act like he hated you the next. It was, and I think he just did that to motivate himself. But you know, he got suspended so many times. Cork bat, throwing a ball at Tony Thompson, the photographer, throwing a ball at the fan, Jeffrey Pillar, running over Fernando Vina in Milwaukee. and back then, you would only, if you appealed your suspension, you could only do it when your team was in New York so they could go to the American League offices. And I spent more time waiting out in the street of the American League office for him or Don Fear or some union guy to come down and explain what, It
was like its own beat.
Albert's, yeah. It was like, how the Yankees should have had what? When, somebody covering Billy Martin, somebody covering Reggie Jackson, somebody covering Steinbrenner. Right. You had to have an Albert Belle beat guy because you never knew what this guy was going to do. He was unpredictable. He was just was, the cork bat thing. The cork bat thing in Chicago,
right?
When he got caught,
right? And the umpire, I think, was Dave Phillips.
Yeah, Davey Phillips
confiscated the bat,
put it in the room, in the umpire's room,
right?
And Jason Grimsley went through the false ceiling, grabbed the bat.
Did he have like a flashlight?
Yeah, he was falling down. Tiles were all over the place. He drops down into the umpire's room and switches bats, but he didn't switch. The smart thing would be just put another Albert Belle bat in there, but he couldn't because every bat Albert had was corked. He had to put a Paul Sorrento bat in there. So I asked Sorrento the next day, how'd your bat end up in the umpire's room? He goes, I know nothing, like Sergeant Schultz. Yeah. It was crazy. It was like a wild weekend, in Chicago. They called the cops and the Hart and I forget who the GM for the White Sox. They almost got into a fight over this thing. It was crazy.
It seemed like you enjoyed it, though.
Yeah, I did.
What did you like about it?
I just liked that action. It was like happening right in front of you. This is all about a bat, really?
Jason Grimsley, he was crawling across the ceiling with a flashlight.
Yeah, from the Indians locker room. They had figured out where the umpire's locker room was, and in the I don't know. I still don't know how he did it, but he was crazy anyways. He was.
Well, that's the thing about the team, and we're talking about Albert and his temperament, but his talent was just unbelievable, right? I mean, think about the hitter that he was, and that whole lineup. That renaissance of the Indians franchise with that type of offense in a new park, there was something going on there. I remember coming up, I worked in Cincinnati, I came up for the playoffs, and the crackling energy and that team, what was that 95 team like to cover? That had to be like the team that there was always something to write about?
Yeah, it was the park itself. Opened in '94. It was like going to Disneyland after the old stadium. I mean, everywhere you look, people were wearing Indians gear. The park was brand new, and the team, like you said, was unbelievable. I mean, you think of that lineup: Kenny Lofton, Vizquel, Carlos Baerga, Bell, and then you had Eddie Murray. And Thome and Ramirez and Sandy Alomar were at the bottom of the batting order.
Right.
Those guys were just young guys.
And Thome's in the Hall of Fame. He's batting seventh.
Yeah, Sorrento was in there. I mean, it was crazy. It was just like you said, a renaissance. And baseball had been so bad for so long in Cleveland that that team. I don't think it'll ever be forgotten. That run of teams that they had. That saved baseball in Cleveland probably, and the fans have really never forgotten that team. It's probably a little bit like the Big Red Machine, I would think. You latch onto a team. You don't forget those guys. You put them in your Hall of Fame. You bring them back every year, and there was such a. It was, those. I remember Buddy Bell was a bench coach or a coach on that team. He said that team liked to be behind in the 7th and 8th inning. They thrived on that. They had so many comeback wins. I remember in 1995, they constantly came from behind. Thome or somebody would hit walk-off home runs, and the place was packed. That was the start of 6 years of sellouts.
455 right in a row.
And you go down to the locker room and you come back, and the press box would be open, and the fans would still be circling the stadium in their cars with the honking horns. And this is like in August. It wasn't like a playoff game or anything. It was just like one of those years that it just doesn't happen very often.
As a journalist, we're not fans, we're not rooting, but at the same time, there's this energy. What did it bring to the job for you?
Yeah, I mean, it energized you. It was fun to talk to those guys. It was fun to see such talent every day, and those guys loved it. They were rolling. Even Albert. Albert was a hit or miss, but those guys. Eddie Murray was on that team, and Eddie would only talk like once a year. But when he talked,
it was
the crease. Yeah, it was like E.F. Hutton talking. Everyone stopped and listened. But, Vizquel was great. Lofton was a little prickly, but you had to get to know him. He was fine. And Carlos was great.
Thome was always
Thome was always
I remember one time I came up, and Thome, he didn't know me because I'm just parachuting into Cleveland, right? And I did an interview with him, and he thanked me. I'm like, what? Thank you for interviewing me.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you talking about?
I remember, the first year they got Vizquel, I don't know if this was 93 or 94, and Thome was on that team. Vizquel, first game in Cleveland, we'd heard all about this Gold Glove shortstop. Mm-hmm. It's against Kansas City. He makes 3 errors, for the first and only time in his career. And he stood up by his locker and answered every question. Thome was sitting there a couple lockers down and watched that, and he never forgot it. And I think that's why he always... he was always a stand-up guy.
Why do you think some guys got that? They understood it. Why?
I think some guys get it, and some guys, some guys are just, I think, get so upset with themselves, and they think, it's like human nature. You're gonna either you take the bullet, or you blame somebody else. But you appreciate those guys, because you need those guys in this job. I mean, because not every game is perfect, and not everybody's going to hit 300. And but you appreciate the guys that understand it, that know, okay, today I was bad, but tomorrow I could go 4 for 4.
There's a go-to guy.
Yeah.
You have a favorite go-to guy over the years, not just those 90s teams, but since then, or maybe back even in the 80s.
Boy. That's a good question. I like talking to Julio. I like talking to Sandy. Baerga was always good. Brooke Jacoby. I always liked Brooke Jacoby. He played third base for them for a long time. And those, guys that were always at their locker. Blyleven was like that. Hargrove was like that. Kuiper was like that.
And let's explain this. We're not talking about guys who are just friendly. We're not making friends.
No.
Right?
Right.
But they're there. And they're at their locker for you. They understand almost like this guy's got to come in and he's got a deadline.
And they give
it
you
from your perspective.
Yeah, and they give you a state. They can give you. This is where we are as a team, and you can get that from a manager, but it's always better, I think, to get it from a player because you can fall into the trap as a writer. I think, you go down, just listen to the writer and listen to the manager, and that's all you quote. And I always try to not do that, throw the quotes, let the manager have his say, but get some reaction from the players because those are the guys on the field.
Why did you think that was important?
I thought it was important just because, they're the guys. They don't come to see the manager, the fans. They come to see the players. They want to know what it felt like to hit the home run, what it felt like to get the big strikeout, what it felt like to boot a ball in the ninth inning.
Right. And that's, again, the fans are reading your stories because they're not there. They want to know what it's like there. And you have that understanding of the fan base because you grew up here.
Yeah.
So there's like a relationship there.
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah.
Speaking of relationships, you mentioned Corrales. You've had how many dozen managers or so?
I think 13 different managers.
Mike Hargrove was a manager in that great run in the 90s with John Hart as GM. And you've had Terry Francona, a great manager. Those two guys always struck me from afar as somebody who would just come in from afar as pretty good guys to deal with. Were they?
Yeah, really good guys. I covered Grover as a player, a coach, and a manager, and he was always honest with you, and he never held grudges. Because I would write stuff that would piss him off.
All right, well, give us an example. Give us an example.
I would just he would just I'd ask questions, and he'd get mad at me. I wrote something about there was some kind of fight or not an argument, or there was somebody I forget. Mike Jackson was one of the coaches. They had a back and forth with when Mike Jackson was a reliever. I wrote about it, and Jackson yelled at me, and I went into Hargrove's office. He goes, "It looks like you got bit in the ass today, huh?" but there was other stuff when I would write something, and he would just maybe it just struck the wrong chord with him, but he'd get it out in the open, and the next day he was fine. And I appreciated that. And he had a tough job with it. As talented as that team was, there were a lot of different personalities on that team and that whole run. And he kept things calm in the locker room. He was really good at that.
What made Hargrove the right manager for that team?
I think I always thought he first of all he was a player. He played for a long time, and he just had a way about him. He was calm. He with the players, you could see him. I know when I think they traded Eddie Murray in 1996, maybe, and Eddie, he was losing playing time. He wasn't happy, and you could see. And he had asked for a trade, and you could see in the outfield before games, him and Hargrove would be walking in the outfield, walking along, talking things out, trying to get things settled. And I thought he really did a great job that way. There was never
steering the boat, right?
Yeah. And I thought he always kept things calm. He always kept things under control.
That's so key, especially with so many different personalities, especially when a team is so talented.
Right, and that's exactly. And those managers never win Manager of the Year.
Right, because they think, they can roll the ball out.
And it's never
Sparky Anderson. You got the big red machine. Of course he's going to win.
And then you got to deal with Albert. You've got to deal. So there was always something going on in that locker room. But he kept a lid on things.
Seems like it always gets back to dealing with Albert.
Yeah, he was a beauty. I got to tell you this one, Albert was, this doesn't involve me, but Mike Sullivan, you remember?
Oh, Sully, yeah.
Mike Sullivan,
a coworker of mine in Columbus.
Okay, Mike Sullivan and Andy Call from are talking to a player right next to Albert's locker, and Albert's not there, and Mike sits down in Albert's chair, and and that's a no-no. That's a bad sign.
The late Sully, that was not a good move.
And then Andy is on one knee talking to the player, and he's kneeling on Albert's hat. Albert's hat had fallen out.
This could be a double homicide.
Yeah. Falling out of the locker, and I'm sitting back here. I'm sitting back in the locker room watching this. Albert comes up, and he's just looking at this. He's looking, and he didn't know what to say. He was like dumbfounded, and he just turned around and walked away.
Really?
Yeah, and he went to Bart Swain or somebody. Look at this! They're sitting in my chair. They're kneeling on my hat.
I like the fact that you let that unfold.
Yeah, I just.
You didn't insert yourself.
Yeah, I had enough problems with him.
You talked about the 95 team in particular and the comebacks, and I'm thinking about it from the perspective of a writer who's on deadline, and you got,
Oh, God.
What was it like covering that team on deadline, and that's going to lead us into Game 7 in 1997?
Yeah, I mean, it was when you have a when your closer goes bad or is like not stable, it is a nightmare. It's a nightmare for the team, but it's a nightmare for the writer as well, because this thing, it can flip so fast, and you're sitting there, you've got all your running done, you've got your story written, you're ready to hit the button, and then boom, it blows up, and you're just in a so you've got two different leads written. You've got it's just. But this was the other way. They were always coming back. So that and if it happened at home in the bottom of the ninth, you still had time. You still had time to write it. But on the road, if they blew a lead on the road, and it ends like that, it's. Whew.
Yeah, it's like all of a sudden the suddenness of it, and if you're not ready,
yeah, because the game just kind of rolls along, and you're the fifth inning, you start writing, and then all of a sudden you're sitting there. I've got everything set, and it blows up, and it's like, good Lord!
All right, worst blow up ever on deadline.
Oh man. There was a lot this past season with Class A. Class A blew 12 saves. So
I changed more leads than any copy
he
desk.
gave me a heart attack. I'm trying to think. There was, I'll tell you, yeah. This wasn't a blown save, but when Kirk Gibson hit the home run in the World Series,
you were covering that game.
Yeah, I was covering that game, and I was sitting there. I was sitting in the back of I think it was at Dodger Stadium,
yeah.
And I couldn't even sit. I was like staring between two pipes. I was way back in the press box,
like by the popcorn machine.
Yeah, and so he hits the home run. I had already sent my story because we're the early deadline, so I'm trying to frantically retype this, put two graphs on the top and send it back in. And here on the desk, they'd already rewritten the thing. So I'm sitting there like, Jesus Christ.
Why am I here?
Yeah, why am I here? Exactly. We didn't think you'd send it. Well, I'm here.
What was that moment like?
That was incredible. That was guy limps up to the plate. He can barely walk, and then I've looked at that swing time and time again. It looked like he didn't even swing. It was kind of like a half swing, and it just wham! It just went out. That was pretty cool. That was a hell of an ending.
I always like the image, if you see the ball going into the stands at Dodger Stadium on that home run, behind that in the parking lot are cars with the red lights on, people who had already left.
Yeah.
They had written their stories there.
That's right, they're gone.
All right, well, we're going to lead us to a painful topic for Indians fans, but in 97, speaking of deadlines, speaking of closers, it's Game 7. It's in the World Series in Florida, the Marlins. The Indians have the lead 2-1. Your story's ready to go, right?
Yeah. You're sitting there like, this is, you just... So we're all up there, and Livy, me, Shaw are all lined up,
right.
And Roy Hewitt is the sports editor,
right?
And he's walking back and forth behind us. He goes, "You got 15 seconds." He's telling you got 5 minutes.
He's like the Raven on your shoulder.
And when somebody tells me that, I lock up. I just and we're sitting there, and you see Mesa blow it, and. Who's who hits a sacrifice fly? The Cubs' new manager that just
I'm having a mind blank. We're having senior moments.
Yeah, well, so they, Macy's got the 2-1 lead, and and years later, I heard, and on one of the documentaries about that team, about the '97 team, they asked Mesa. I guess Sandy was calling, for fastballs, Sandy Alomar, and Mesa didn't want to throw the fastball, and they finally somebody asked Mesa why. And he said that Hargrove didn't like the way his slider was working, and so he was calling the fastballs from the bench. And Mesa said he hadn't called my pitches all year, so why was he calling them now? So that's why he stuck with the one pitch, and they hit the sacrifice fly and tied it up. But the thing about that game was Charlie Nagy was scheduled to start that game. He was a veteran starter. Right. They started a rookie, Jarrett Wright.
Yeah, why did they make that decision?
Because that Wright was the hotter pitcher.
But it's Game 7.
I know, Game 7, and he pitched well.
He did pitch well. They had a 2-1 lead.
Yeah, 2-1 lead, and in the 11th inning, I believe, they bring Nagy in out of the bullpen, and Edgar Renteria, Tony Fernandez makes the error, and the guy goes to third, and Edgar Renteria bounces one over Nagy's glove. It just tips off the top of his glove. It goes into center field, and they win it. And it was just like, good Lord! I mean, it was like, But I really wasn't that upset. I didn't get up that upset. You just think about the journey that team was on. I think they played 19 postseason games that year.
Yeah.
I mean, and in that locker room, they were exhausted. You could just see that every player on there was exhausted. They were just done. They were cooked, because it seemed like every series, they beat Baltimore when Fernandez hits the home run in the 10th or 11th inning. When Herbie had the greatest call, Herbie scored. He goes, Tony Fernandez hits the go-ahead home run in the top of the 10th or top of the 11th inning, and Herbie goes, and the Indians are going to the World Series. Maybe. That pause and then maybe, because they had to hit, but Baltimore still had to hit.
That's like a writer who said the story into her.
Yeah. Maybe. Pregnant pause, maybe.
What was it like in the press box? Because this is a story about doing the job, sports writing. What was it like in the press box at the moment when the game changed like that? Because you're not rooting, you're not a fan.
No,
you're trying to do your job. So, but this is Game 7.
Yeah, and I am in total panic mode. I'm like just get this in, get the score right, and get it in. And I had some reference to the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean, and I'm going. Bud is sitting next to me, and I'm going, what ocean is that out there?
That's how tense
Pacific or Atlantic? And I'm like, I've got no idea. And it just
some body of water.
Yeah. So Bud says the Atlantic Ocean. And I go,
you asking me?
What are you asking me for? And it was just like, God, you're just like, you hope it came out in English. That was my hope.
Well, you don't speak Spanish, so you just type loud.
That's right.
Type this
That's
loud,
right.
and you'll understand it.
That's right.
All right, body of water, World Series.
Yeah.
I think that takes us to 2016.
Yeah. Oh, man.
All right, hold on a second
Okay.
before we get to the body of water. September 16.
Oh, God. I forgot about that.
You write a column in September, mid-September 2016. The Indians, the fans are really into this team.
Yeah.
It's the first time in 9 years they're going to win the division. They lose, but they won the game.
Yeah.
But Carrasco takes a ball off his arm. He's out. Broken wrist.
Yeah.
You write.
Yeah, so Carrasco gets hit in the wrist, breaks his wrist. He's done for the season. Danny Salazar, a week earlier, had blown his elbow out, and he was done.
Right.
And so and I remember the sports editor told me, well, you're not just the beat writer, you're also the columnist too. We want you. Oh yeah, look out.
So
Okay, so but Carrasco, he breaks his wrist. The Guardians win the game or 1-0, 2-1, great game against the Tigers, and so I write my game story. Then I said, well, I might, I'm sitting down there, and I'm saying to myself, these guys are done. They're done. There's no way. They can't play against Boston. They can't play against Toronto in the postseason. And with two of their starting pitchers down, and so I write this column and said, okay, they're going to win they're going to skate to the AL Central. They'll win the division title, but that's it. And I put some headline on it, September 15th, the day the Indians' postseason hopes died before they started, or some damn thing like that. And I don't even, I think, hey, I wrote it. I think everybody must be feeling this way.
Right.
And the next day, it was a Saturday. The next day was Sunday. It was an off day.
You had an off day.
Yeah.
Right.
And all of a sudden, my phone is blowing up Sunday. All these people from the Indians are calling. Everybody, the front office is pissed off. The players are threatening a boycott. People are sending me text messages like, no, unsigned, don't show up, don't come back to the locker room. I said, Jesus Christ. And I honestly, I didn't think it was that bad, but reading when you reread it, it's probably something I could have over the edge. It was probably something I should have waited on.
Well, Jason Kipnis was like, "Hey, why bother to come?"
Yeah, right.
If you think we have no future, well, what's the point of coming in here?
So
come on, Hoynsie.
Yeah. So and one of the worst things was I had to go see my proctologist. I had the day, a couple days after the story ran.
Like you haven't already had the proctology exam.
And he didn't like the column either. And he told me that. So you put him in a vulnerable position. All right.
Talk about having an editor.
Yeah. So I think they were off. I was off Sunday. They were off Monday. I come back Tuesday.
After your proctology.
Yeah. And you know how, like, you walk in the locker room most of the time, there's nobody in there?
Yeah.
I walked in the locker room. Every chair was filled. They were all waiting.
They were waiting for you.
Yeah, and, and they some guys talked to me, some guys didn't. And then it was weird. It was a couple days later, some guy texts me. I get a text, and it says, hey, if the Guardians or if the Indians get to the World Series, if the Guardians don't get to the World Series, I'll jump into Lake Erie. And then, but if they do get to the World Series, you've got to jump into Lake Erie. So I'm all over that. I said, there is no way they're getting to the World Series. Yeah, I said, yeah, definitely.
This guy's like Matty Cleveland, right? The guy's name is Matty Cleveland. Yeah,
some guy. So I'm right on that. And then okay, so I think they play Boston in the first round, and what's his face? Bauer gets attacked by one of his drones, cuts his finger, so he can't pitch. So they're down 3 starters. So I'm thinking, God, I'm golden here. But they have basically a 2-man pitching staff: Josh Tomlin and Corey Kluber. But Francona pulls this out of his hat. He revolutionized the way people use the bullpen. He's got Andrew Miller, so Miller becomes like the second starter almost. Right. Whenever there's trouble, no matter what inning it is, 6th, 7th, or 8th, he's in there. Then you got Brian Shaw and then Cody Allen closing. And they blow through Boston. They sweep Boston. They beat Toronto in the ALCS, and I think Game 6, maybe 4 or 5, maybe Game 5. They bring this left-hander, the little lefty, Ryan Merritt, that they had stashed in Goodyear. He was out in Arizona staying sharp. So he comes in and throws 4 1/3 scoreless, and they win that game, and they're going to the World Series. And I'm saying, Jesus Christ.
Because now
I got to go in the lake. And so I'm sitting there. We're in bed one night with Jackie and me, and I'm driving her crazy, because what am I going to do?
No, really?
Yeah. What am I going to do? What am I going to do this? I don't know what I should do. And Jackie goes, "You're going in the lake because you're driving me nuts." So we go out to Fairport Harbor, and she videotapes me. It's like this gray, overcast day before Game 1 of the World Series. The Perry nuclear plant is in the background, and so I go down to the lake.
Wait a minute, how cold was it? What was the temperature?
It was like I don't know. It was like it was maybe 45, 50 outside.
Balmy.
I know, and the thing was, but it was like look foreboding, And so the thing was, there's like 4 or 5 geese walking by the shore, and they're not even in the water, and I'm going in the water. They're kind of looking at me. Who is this maniac? So,
even the geese will.
Yeah. So I go.
Wait a minute. I think the geese had bet on the Indians. Yeah. We're glad you were going.
Maybe. So I go in there, jump in the water, dive in the water, and I think everything was set. Everything was cool after that. I think I'd made amends, maybe. I don't know, but I don't know.
Well, some people wish you had lead shoes on.
Yeah, right.
Well, you were a man of your word. You stood up to it.
Yeah.
When you went into that locker room after the column, and everybody was sitting in the chairs waiting for you, what was that like?
That was uncomfortable, and I've been in I've been in situations, where you walk in and somebody's waiting for you, but the whole team was kind of waiting for me right there, and I didn't really go up to anybody to talk to them. I just kind of followed the pack, and I've given all the reporters came down with me, and I'll give them credit. They didn't leave me out on an island,
They surrounded you.
Yeah.
Protected.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that was.
In all seriousness, what was the relationship like with covering the team on a daily basis after that, as they made this great run? Did anything change in terms of how they responded to you, or?
Well, Kipnis came up to me after they beat Toronto and gave me a half bottle of champagne, and we toasted, and I took a drink. But so I think he got, at least he got over it. I don't know if anybody else did, but I think it worked out all right. But by then. I didn't care. I was just glad I got past that.
Exactly. Well, it didn't quite all work out right. Again, for the Indians fans and the team, you were facing another Game 7 here in Cleveland. The Chicago Cubs, they've got their own curse. The Indians are trying to win with their own curse. I was here that night covering the game. I remember the atmosphere. Again, you're there to do your work, but the feeling in that stadium was unbelievable.
That's the best. That's kind of I remember that more of all the games that I've covered. I remember the vibe in that park that day or that night, and especially when Rajah Davis hit the home run to tie it up. I've never heard the ballpark like that. And the thing was, the Indians season ticket holders. They'd given them extra tickets, all the season ticket holders, and they'd sold them all to Cubs fans. So there was probably as many Cubs fans as there was Indians fans at the ballpark. But when Davis hit that home run, I mean, it was like the ballpark was shaking. Remember old Yankee Stadium would shake during the postseason? You feel the press box shake. That's what it didn't move at Progressive Field, but that's what it felt like to me.
Right. I remember when I thought Kipnis was going to hit a homer.
Yeah, he missed, just yanked it foul, and that would have been the game winner. That would have been running.
Because he had him just teed up, the timing of that. And so we're almost on this historic moment for Cleveland fans. And again, you've got your story written, and then they roll the tarp out. Yeah. It started raining.
I know.
It's like 5 minutes to my deadline. I don't know what deadline you were on, but I was sitting there. Are you crazy? Are you kidding me? You're going to have a rain delay?
Yeah. And what was 11-minute rain delay? It was like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I said, God, play through this. You got the and then that was it. It seemed like all the momentum they had, and he brings Shaw back out after the rain delay, and I think they scored a couple runs. It was 8-7. They lose 8-7.
Do you think it impacted the outcome?
I think it did. Yeah.
Why?
I just thought it killed the momentum. I thought that I thought they were ready. I thought they were ready to win that right there. They tied it up, and you get back out there, and the Cubs what scored twice, I think, and made it 8-6, and then I think Raja drove in another run in the bottom of the ninth. Or the bottom of the 10th to make it 8-7. They just, and then who made the last out? Michael Martinez, and Michael Martinez grounds out to third base, makes the last out, and he had come in as defense for Coco Crisp in left field, and Coco, you would have much rather had Coco up there. At least he had a chance to hit the ball out of the park. So, it was a great game, but it just, like you said, it just didn't work out. I mean, it's just something about Game 7's extra innings. It just it's not made for Cleveland. It's not made, and it's and I always think, one game shouldn't decide a whole season. That was a great run by those guys, and it was a great season. I'm more into the journey of it, the whole season from, spring training on, but, it helps if you win the last game.
Right. When you think about that night, when you went home that night, the journey, I mean, everything you've covered so many games from spring training on, and all these different things happened, things we were laughing about, but also the ups and downs, and to get that close. Again, you don't necessarily personally care about the outcome, but that journey you were on as a journalist, as a writer, what did you feel when you went home or woke up the next day?
I was just, exhausted. Because I don't think we left the ballpark till 5, 6 in the morning.
Yeah.
And so, because with the way with the internet now, you can write forever. You write different stories. So
it's like on the road, Jack.
That's right. They want this, they want that. Yeah. So it just. At the end of every season, I go and lay down in the middle of my living room and just look at the ceiling for about an hour and count the cracks in the ceiling, because it's over and you made it through another one.
And yet you're still going.
That's right. But yeah,
Hoynsie, you're still going. You're still going to the park every day, covering this sport, this demanding beat day after day. What has kept you going and so invested in this beat?
I just like it. I still like it, Todd. I still like I just like the storylines that develop. I like seeing the players, as they develop and get better or get worse, and talking to the players, talking to the coaches. I just like it. I can't explain it any other way. I just like the flow of the season. I like traveling. I like being on the road most of the time, and I just like it.
Beats working.
Yeah, it beats working. And like you said, your office is Fenway Park. That's not too bad.
Not too bad. Not too bad. Well, we certainly appreciate your time. And I know the Cleveland fans, they might get mad at you sometime, Hoynsie, but, they're very lucky to have somebody like you that does have all this knowledge about baseball since the early 80s here in this city. And you're a trusted voice in that regard, right? I mean, you know the ups and downs and the ins and outs of what's happened here, and I think that's very appreciative here in Northeast Ohio, and I just want to speak for the audience in that regard.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks, Todd. That was a blast, man.
Yeah. You paying or I paying?
Yeah.
Thanks, Hoynsie.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Press Box Access. You can find us here with a new episode every other Wednesday. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe and follow us on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app. We'd love for you to review us. 5 stars would be nice. Follow us on social media. Drop us an email at pressboxaccess@gmail.com. And be sure to spread the word. Everyone is welcome here. This has been a production of Evergreen Podcast. A special thank you to executive producers Michael D'Aloia and Gerardo Orlando, producer Bill Huffman, and our audio engineer Nathan Corson. I'm your host, Todd Jones. It's closing time. Rock on.
Bruce Martin, host of Pit Pass Indy. Each week, I go behind the scenes of the NTT IndyCar Series and introduce our listeners to the biggest stars of IndyCar, which features the Indianapolis 500 as its cornerstone event. The men and women that compete in IndyCar may be the bravest athletes in all of sport, as danger lurks around every corner. They are able to look danger in the eye without flinching. That is why the NTT IndyCar Series features the best racing on the planet. Join me every week as we talk to the stars of IndyCar, including the legends of the Indianapolis 500 on Pit Pass Indy from Evergreen Podcast.